Micah chapter 5, a promised ruler from Bethlehem. Marshal your troops, O city of troops, for a siege is laid against us. They will strike Israel's ruler on the cheek with a rod. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Therefore Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor gives birth, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth, and he will be their peace. And from Luke chapter 2. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Saviour has been born to you. He is Christ the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly, a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angels, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to men on whom his favour rests." While the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in a manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told. Thanks.
Who, indeed? What the Israelites wanted was someone, a man or an army, to come in and get rid of the hated Romans who had been occupying Israel for some time. But what happens instead? A baby comes. The Roman occupation lasted about 400 years in Israel, and Pompey conquered Israel in 63 BC, and that was the first change they'd known for a very long time. Herod the Great, who dubbed himself King of the Jews, became king in 40 BC. And the 100 years occupation between 63 BC and 36 AD were terrible years. There was persecution, they were taxed for just about everything that you could think of. And we know that Matthew was one of the tax collectors, which made his life a bit difficult. So in a way, it was no wonder that they wanted them out. Jews were allowed to worship, but they had to be very, very careful how they did so, and many of them were actually killed. So the Jews particularly would have known about God's promises, of God sending a saviour for Israel, but what they didn't really understand was in what form that saviour would take. So as I said, I was thinking about promises and resolutions. I don't know about you, but I don't make New Year resolutions. They are, in my view, doomed to failure. But I did actually start thinking about what was the difference between a resolution and a promise. So I went to our usual source of information these days, Mr. Google, and discovered that a meaning, a synonym for resolution means courage or spirit or tenacity, and that they may be mental or moral, or give you mental or moral strength to resist opposition, danger or hardship. And resolution sort of stresses a determination to achieve one's ends. Promise, I think in some ways it's a bit softer, but in some ways it's more meaningful. It can mean all sorts of things, like a word of honour, a pledge, a vow, an oath, an agreement, commitment, and for those of us who are Methodists, a covenant. I've always liked that word, covenant. God makes his covenant with Noah after the flood, that he will never flood the earth again. It's a very meaningful promise. So in a way, we can make a resolution to keep our promises. I have a study Bible that lists all the words that are in that version of the Bible. And there are 57 references to promises. And in the total concordance, which is much, much bigger, about 200. Two people who must have wanted something to do have actually been through the Bible and listed every promise that has been made. One of them came up with 7,147, and the other something over 8,000. I think they said it took him a year and a half to do it. I think better things to do with my time, actually. But there are lots of promises in the Bible, and they're not necessarily explicit. It doesn't say, I promise to do this, but there's implicit promises of all kinds. And Psalm 119 has 11 all to itself. And I particularly like the verse that says, your promise preserves my life. That's such a comforting, encouraging few words to know that God is always there and he will always look after us. We had a reading from Micah that was an implicit forecast of Jesus' birth. The Ephrathah, I don't know how you pronounce it, but that is just the place where Bethlehem was situated like a state. So Jesus' birth, Jesus' beginnings go back much earlier than his birth. And Micah emphasizes that in his those verses we heard. He says he's one whose origins are from old, from ancient times. And he gives encouragement too. He tells us that the Messiah will be a shepherd who rules in the strength and majesty of God. And a shepherd looks after his sheep. He doesn't weigh them down with lots of rules and regulations and hardship, but a shepherd looks after his sheep and cares for them and is interested in their health and well-being and wants to look after us, and that's how God wants to look after us. He also said that Jesus is our peace. And in the Hebrew word for peace also means prosperity. And one of the things that we're told later on is that Jesus came to give us life in the full. And that's that sort of prosperity. It's not the prosperity with lots of money in the bank and a flash car and a beautiful house. It's that being able to live life to the full, to enjoy life and appreciate life, and appreciate the people around us, the beauty of creation, all that sort of thing is the sort of prosperity that I think he was meaning. I lived on the corner of Hoo Lake, and it is actually quite a beautiful place in a way to live. I mean, just across the water, of course, there's the oil and all the industrial things where the big tankers come in. But on the other hand, where I live, I can see the water coming in and out, boats. We have a family of swans, 2 adults and 2 cygnets, but there are other birds, and it's just fascinating to see what they do and how they do it. And that's all part of having a prosperous lifestyle. But there's lots of other things as well, and for you, there will be different things that appeal to you, that make you feel at peace with yourself, at peace with the world, and that you can enjoy the love of God. So there are all sorts of different promises in a way. I looked it up to see what the promises were and was quite surprised that I didn't get what I expected, because I expected things like the Messiah would come, that Sarah would have a child even though she was past childbearing age. And sure enough, eventually she had Isaac. The rainbow promise that God gave after the big flood and Noah and his ark, that he would never again flood the earth like that. And a rainbow is a beautiful thing, isn't it? I mean, just to see that arc in the sky with the colours, it just gives me, anyway, a feeling of peace and of fulfilment. But what was actually listed was things that are more intangible. Enduring love. God is our refuge in time of trouble. He's always there. We can go to him when we need to. He gives us strength for the weary and his constant presence. There is nowhere we can go where God isn't. In a very similar way, Jesus gave us promises like that. He gave us promise for strength for the weary. He encourages us to lay our burdens at his feet, and he will give us rest. It's difficult to do, but the promise is there. He will never turn us away. He says he is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the light of the world, and we light candles in reflection of that this is the light of the world, and the darkness will never, ever overcome it. There will always be light. But on the other hand, I think we have to do our bit. Any relationship is reciprocal, isn't it? I mean, we do talk about, or we have heard about, unrequited love, but in most relationships, it's a two-way thing, however it is, or whatever it is. As I was driving here this morning, I was concentrating, I promise, but there was a man walking his dog, and the dog was looking up at his master with absolute adoration. And that was a relationship between an animal and a man. And it's amazing, actually, how often I look and see that look of an animal to its owner. And there is a feeling between them. So we have to do our bit. We're not puppets on a string. We have been given free will. We are free to choose whether we follow Jesus or not. We are free to make our own choices. Someone once said to me that it was the worst gift we'd ever been given, free will, which produced a sermon the next week saying that free will was a great gift, actually, to be able to make choices. I think when you're pushed into a corner and someone said, I had no choice, I had to do it, it's a very uncomfortable feeling. So there's no pressure like that about our relationship with God. We are free to love him, we are free to follow him, we are free to worship him, but we don't have to. It is not compulsory. Then I was thinking too about more everyday promises, if you like, promises we make when we get married. I was married in a register office, and on our wedding night, I felt really uncomfortable because I hadn't promised to, the wedding vows, to love and cherish and care for, and not necessarily obey, but we know the wedding vows. But I hadn't said them, and I wasn't a Christian at the time, but it was that deep feeling that I hadn't made the promise and I needed to do it. So we made promises to each other, lying in bed, and it was lovely. I was properly married. We make other promises too, don't we? As church, we make a promise at baptism services. The godparents make their promises that they will try to encourage the child to love Jesus, to know about Jesus, and to go on. And I always feel slightly uncomfortable when the congregation is asked to make that promise too, that we will nurture and help the child, and then you never see the child again. It's a promise that it's very difficult to keep because you don't ever see it, you don't have the opportunity to carry it out. As local preachers and ministers, we make promises when as local preachers, when we're accredited, that we will lead worship, we will attend communion services, and that we will continue to study. And those promises are renewed every year, or at least they should be. I'm very pleased to say that last year we did, and I felt, I felt right. So, and they're not easy to keep. They're really not easy to keep. You have to really concentrate and really think about what you're doing. I've mentioned the covenant service. Unfortunately, this year I'm going to miss it because I'm preaching all 3 weeks, and I miss a covenant service, which I find actually quite difficult. But maybe I can find one online that I can catch up with later on. And then there are sort of everyday promises, aren't they? Things, I promise I'll bring that book for you when I see you tomorrow, or I promise I will, see you next week, or just the gentle promises that we make every day in our everyday lives. And mostly we keep them. Sometimes it's impossible, maybe because of illness or all sorts of things can happen, but promises are there. So one promise that has come true is the promise of Jesus' birth. And it was foretold 11 times in the Old Testament. We tend to forget how relevant the Old Testament is to the New, but it's all one book, it's all connected together. So, sometimes they're implicit rather than explicit. They said that there are 2 occasions in Genesis where the implication is that a son will be born, that God will, but they're not actually very easy to find. In Isaiah, there are 2. One that probably most of us would recognize: unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. It comes in the Messiah. It's very often a reading we have at Christmas, and it's all part of that foretelling of Jesus' birth. I won't bore you with the other books that are in there, but there are these occasions when the foretelling of Jesus' birth is there. I read somewhere that it said that the promise in Genesis was at least 1,500 years before, and I thought, that's not right. That can't be right. If we believe that God created the world, and we actually know that the world is millions of years old, it must be longer than 1,500 years, which just gives us a very strange time span, doesn't it? and we're used to our time spans, 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week, etc. But God's timing is quite different from that. It's just endless, actually, and we never know what's coming. And then I was thinking too of that fulfillment of the promise and how people reacted to it. And a very early reaction to Jesus' birth was when Mary, when she was first pregnant, went to visit her cousin Elizabeth, who was also pregnant at the time. And Elizabeth actually recognizes who the baby is that Mary is carrying. She says something like, how wonderful it is that the mother of our Lord should come to visit me. And her baby leapt in her womb as though he recognized the baby in Mary's womb. It's a very strange sort of feeling. Luke, as we've heard this morning, tells us of Jesus' birth. He tells us of the story of the shepherds who were out on the hill minding their sheep. They were probably not the owners of the sheep, so they took a huge risk in leaving those sheep on the hillside while they came down into Bethlehem to visit Jesus. But the compulsion was so strong, they had to do it. They could have lost their jobs. They could have even been killed for leaving the sheep abandoned, if anything had happened to the sheep. And then we think of the 3 wise men who travelled long distance because they were so convinced that the star that they could see foretold of the birth. It was quite interesting, actually. They also said that the Star of Bethlehem was actually last seen in 2020 and will come again in 2080. I'm not sure any of us will see that, but we have to believe what we're told sometimes. So Jesus' actual birth had an enormous effect on a lot of people, because the shepherds went home and told everybody about it. They said how wonderful it was, the Saviour of the world is here. And then just a little bit later on, when Mary and Joseph take Jesus to the temple, and they meet the old couple who've been waiting all this time for Jesus' birth, for Simeon and Anna. And at last, that promise is fulfilled, and they are able to be at peace. John's Gospel also emphasizes this fact of Jesus being always there, always with us. It says, in the beginning, the Word was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. So Jesus was present at creation. And from that, the change of the world, he came to change the world. And Jesus taught us to love each other. Love yourself, love your neighbour, and to love God. Sorry, that was in the wrong order. Love God, love yourself, and love your neighbour. And that was just a simple way of loving God, of being Christians. We no longer had 633 rules, petty, niggly, meaningless additions to the 10 Commandments. But the greatest promise of all, I think, is when Jesus says, I will be with you until the very end of the age. And that is because he loves us.